We are starting a new Torah portion because before we last week we said it's something called Shabbos Chazak. Shabbos Chazak literally means a Shabbos of strength. And what does that mean, the idea of strength? That when we finish a whole book, we call it Shabbos Chazak, we call it strength. So there's 5 books of Torah, and we just finished the 3rd book of Torah. So let's try to recap a little bit so we can see where we're standing in this whole story of our Torah, what's happening. So the first book, which is called Bereshis, or translated as Genesis, Bereshis means in the beginning. And it talks about in the beginning, Hashem created the world. And in this book of Genesis, in the beginning, it gives the historical background to everything that's about to happen. And this gives the historical background to, the backdrop to the Jewish people becoming a nation. And so in the book of Bereshis, it basically talks about our forefathers, the Avos, Abraham, Yitzchok, and Yaakov, and all their stories, how, beforehand, it starts off with Adam and Chava, the first people, and their mistake and their sin. And then, now what we're left with, that we have to work within this physical world in order to create a space which is holy and godly for Hashem to live in, to dwell in, I should say. And, then it goes on, God is very kind, and he, and then we have Noah, how he is living in a time where people are evil, and when you're just living a place in a time where there's only do whatever you want, you don't have rules, and you don't have structure, then unfortunately that could lead to issues, that could lead to people acting very immoral. So, it's interesting because when I think of that, I think of, a friend once told me, she said that she went on a hike, and she was on this hike, and, they were climbing, and her kids, come to the top, and they want to look and see the view, and she's so nervous. Her kids are going near a cliff near the end, and God forbid they could fall down. And, that's really nerve-wracking, for anybody, but especially a mother to see. And she's so nervous, and she's about to hold on to her kids' hands and restrain them. You got to just hold my hands, and that's it. Don't go past my hands. And then she sees that there's a gate. And once she sees the gate, she says, oh, okay, there's a gate. The kids can't fall. And so she lets them run loose, and they're able to go. So sometimes we see all the rules and the laws, and we see it as it's a limitation. Oh, I don't want this. This is stuff. But actually, in this case, the gate, the limitation, allowed the kids to run freely. And so that's how it is. When we have rules, sometimes we think of it as, this is so hard and this is so restricting, but actually it gives us our freedom. And so that's what we see from Noach, that, when there were no rules, it just brought about, it didn't bring about freedom. It brought about the exact opposite. And when we have rules, it gives us. And then we come to the time of Abraham, and, he discovered Hashem, and we have Yitzchok, and we have Yaakov, and how, they formed and created the Jewish people. And Yaakov was the one that had the 12 tribes, and all 12 sons were righteous and holy. And this is where we have the Jewish people. And then we move on to the book of Shemais, of Exodus, which literally means names. because, like we said, the first book is called Bereshit. It's the beginning. It's giving us the backdrop. It's giving us the historical background and telling us, where do we come from? What's our history? Who are we? Then we come to Shemais, which means names. And it shows how Hashem is giving a name. He's giving an identity to the Jewish nation. And their task is to make this world into a holy place. And it describes how they come to the land of Egypt. And basically it's talking about from when they came to Egypt until they were redeemed to Egypt and they got the Torah. And this is where they really become a people. First, we have challenges. Challenges make us stronger. And after the challenges make us stronger, then we become a strong people. And then we are able to receive the Torah. And this is our identity, working with the world, refining what we need to. It says when they went to Egypt, there were certain sparks that they had to refine. So going in, refining those sparks, leaving Egypt, coming out of the challenges, coming out stronger, refining themselves. That's the time that we're in now, counting until they get the Torah and then getting the Torah. And then we went on to Vayikra, Leviticus. That's what we just finished. And this is, Vayikra means, and he called. And this is saying how the Jew is to answer. Hashem called out. How are we responding to Hashem calling out? And this details how the Jew is to answer their spiritual calling, their divine calling, by remaining both separate from the material world and at the same time elevating it. Because we were talking about the Mishkan, and we were saying really in order to bring this holiness into the world, we need to have something physical. That's how we bring it about. So when we synthesize the physical and the spiritual, that's when we reveal the essence of Hashem. We do a simple mitzvah with the physical thing when we light a Shabbos candle, when I eat something kosher, when I visit someone who's not feeling well, when I make a kind gesture. These physical things are the vessel, the conduit in which God's essence can come into the world. And now finally where we're at, what we're starting this week, is the book of Bamidbar, which means desert. And this whole imagery of the desert is symbolic of an unrectified world. Like the desert is like barren and not like a civilized, built up place. And that is the idea of our world being unrectified. And meaning that it's hiding God, and it's, it is antagonistic to Hashem and his presence. And after the Torah told us how the world became such a desert, how the Jewish people were created, and it tells us, because what are we learning from this fact that this whole Torah portion is called desert? And we learn that the world looks like a desert. The world is desolate of godliness. The world is hiding God. You come in, you just see a desert, it's dry. There's nothing to drink. Torah is water. So you look and you see, like, I don't see Torah. I don't see the Torah's perspective. I go out into this world. This world is full of klipa. Klipa literally means a shell. Now, a shell is something that conceals. So we're living in a world where godliness is concealed. So why is it called a shell? Because if you take a shell, like if I show you something, I show you this, I say, hey, what's in here? See that, right? What's in here? There could be $1 million in here. There could be a pair of glasses. There could be a ring. There could be anything. And you have no idea, because I could show you this and I could say, okay, open it. Hey, there's nothing in it. It's empty. And then there could be a different one. I say, hey, what's in it? There's glasses. I could say, how much do you think this is worth? And you could say, all right, glasses. All right, it's worth $200, right? But you actually have no idea what's in there, because a different time, there could be something else in there. And I open it and you say, oh yeah, it's worth $200, a pair of glasses. And what do I take out? A ring that's worth thousands of dollars. So let's say you don't know what's behind it. You don't know what's really in it. Let's say you look at a watermelon. It's green. You open it up, the inside is red. But guess what? I open up the orange, inside it's orange. Because I know what a watermelon is, I know that the consistency inside is going to be different than the outside, and that it's going to be a different color. But if it's something that I've never seen the inside, an exotic fruit that I've never eaten before, I won't know, because some fruit, the inside is the same color, some it's different. So a shell conceals. So what are we trying to say? We're trying to say that really God is in this world. Really, you just didn't know that my glasses were in there. You just didn't know that my ring was in there. But really, it was there. So God is in this world. Hashem is in our world. But he's concealed. But that doesn't change the reality. Just because you don't know that the inside of a watermelon is red, it doesn't mean it's not red. And even though the whole time that I didn't cut the watermelon open, it doesn't mean it wasn't red inside. It just means I was sitting in the dark and didn't know that. So Hashem is always there. But it's just that sometimes he's covered. And our job is to take that covering off and to reveal Hashem, to take away that darkness that makes the world look like a desert and a place where there is no godliness. It looks like it's desolate, but really it's just because there's a covering, right? Like if I put a shabby cover over something, you think, oh, this is some shabby thing. And then you could take it off and there could be sapphire and rubies and tremendous gems. So the cover is not indicative of reality. The cover is not indicative to what is really going on. But the reality is under there, and our job is to uncover the reality. So in our life, our job is to uncover, take the falsehood of this world and uncover it so that we could see Hashem and the divine energy. And how do we do this? Every time we do a mitzvah, we reveal Hashem. Every time we come in tune and we look at a situation, for example, I could say, oh, that just happened to happen. That I just came at this exact moment, and it's usually so hard to find parking, and look, there's just a spot here. Or I could say, you know what? Hashem guided it this way. Hashem made it this way. And so it could be in little things like that. It could be in big, huge things. Miracles happen and people say, it just worked out this way. It wasn't Hashem. You know, like there's stories of people, they're praying and praying and praying. And then when God comes to help them, they're like, no, thanks. I don't need your help. I already got help. Well, it's because you prayed that Hashem sent it to you. Like and sometimes we push away things that God is really giving us. So for example, there's a famous story. It's like a parable that there was a man and he was stuck on an island and he was begging Hashem, please, I only trust in you. I always only trusted in you. Please, please, could you help me? Please, please, I'm begging you, come and save. And he really believed that Hashem would come and save him. And so he's praying and praying to Hashem that he should save him. And a helicopter comes by and says, oh, you're stuck. Do you want me to help you? He says, no, thank you. He says to himself, God is going to help me. I'm not going to let this person help me. I believe in God. And then a ship came by a little bit later, and the ship says, oh, it looks like you're stuck. Would you like to come and, we could take you? He says, no. Why would I take the ship when God is going to come and help me? Of course, I believe in Hashem and he's going to help me. I'm not going to go on that ship. Are you kidding me? And then he's waiting and nothing's happening. He's so upset. And he's screaming out to Hashem, Hashem, I had so much trust in you that when that ship came, I said, no, only God's going to save me. When the helicopter came, I said, no, only God's going to save me. And now what? Just staying here. And Hashem says, I sent that ship. I sent that helicopter. So sometimes Hashem is trying to send us something and we don't even realize. And we deny that it's Hashem that is sending it. So we want to bring back the world to its intrinsic nature. And it tells us how the Jews are sent out into this desert, into this desolate land to accomplish their goal. It's really to test their dedication, right? To their destiny and see their resistance to this environment. And if we're going to get tricked by everything that is around us. So in this desert, Hashem takes care of them. Hashem gives them the manna. Hashem gives them, quails, animals. Hashem provides them water, even though they're in the desert. And Hashem really takes care of them in this desert. And so it goes through a lot of these different challenges and times that the Jews complained and God helped them. And time again, there's a war. There's the Egyptians chasing them. There's a war with Amalek, with the Amalekis who dared, start up with them after everyone was scared because God took them out of Egypt. And they saw all the miracles, 10 plagues, and they saw how the Egyptians drowned. And so miracle after miracle, and Hashem just caring and taking care and providing for the Jews, during all this time. And so what does it start off with in the book of Bamidbar? It starts off with Hashem. It's called Numbers also, meaning in English we call it Numbers, even though Bamidbar means desert. And it's called Numbers because it describes the journey of the Jewish people from the Mount Sinai to coming to Israel, this time in between when after they got the Torah and now they're in the desert, what happens to them? End up sinning. Well, that's actually in the book of Shemos that we already finished a while ago. But because they sinned with the golden calf, then they're stuck, in the desert. And what happens over all these 40 years, all their journeys and, how they become a stronger nation and what they learn from it. And so it's describing the journey of the Jewish people from Har Sinai, from Mount Sinai, until they're going to get to the land of Israel. And Hashem tells Moshe to take account. That's why it's called Numbers. And he says, take account of all the adult Jewish males. Why only the adult Jewish males? Women are so important in the Torah. Women are so important in Judaism. And the answer is that this was for the army. And the women, don't go to the army. And, in the Torah, you have to be a male, and you have to be a male over 20. So it's not about value. This person's valued more than the other person. It's just that the purpose of this count was to get a census of adult Jewish males who were fit to go into the army. So the purpose of this census is to form an army in case it would be necessary to fight the non-Jewish occupants who were living in the land of Israel when the Jewish people would finally finish their journey in the desert. Are they going to have, if need be, will they have an army to fight the people that are living in the land of Israel so that they could conquer it? So we see that the opening parsha Bamidbar describes how Hashem assembles this young nation into his army. And it's specifically in this parsha, as they're about to leave their sheltered world where they were living in the desert. Why was it a sheltered world? Because like we said, there was no water in the desert, but God provided them with a well. And they didn't have to do anything. It was miraculous. And then we had the idea of the manna that fell from heaven. They didn't have to sow, plant, and plow, and work for their food. They just simply got the manna. So they were coming from this world that was so sheltered. It's compared to like a yeshiva. Because when a boy is in yeshiva, he has everything provided for him and he doesn't need to work, and he could just sit and focus on his learning Torah, and he could just learn and learn and learn. And he could daven, he could pray without the pressures and the financial stress. So this was the state that the Jewish people were in the desert, in this yeshiva, where they were able just to be removed from physicality and be able to just study. And now they are leaving this sheltered environment, and they are now they were leaving the sheltered environment of getting the Torah, and they were now going in to this place of the desert where it was desolate, and God would provide for them and give it, to eventually go to Israel where they would have to work the land. And so they needed to have this army to prepare, leaving this Mount Sinai where they actually saw Hashem constantly. In the desert, it was up and down. They were provided by Hashem, but a lot of times they didn't see it and they didn't feel it. Mount Sinai, they literally heard and saw Hashem. And so now this is a time where they need to be formed into a formal army. So the lesson that we can learn from this parasha, from this Torah portion, is that we should never delude ourselves into thinking that the world is a benign, neutral entity that we have no role in. We play a huge, huge role in this world. We are able to perfect this world. And the world and everything in it is a challenge. But that's because we're supposed to dig deep inside ourselves, and we're supposed to summon our greatest spiritual strengths and build a beautiful garden in this desert. We're supposed to bring it back to its original form where God is revealed. So in the beginning of Bamidbar, in this Torah portion, I was talking, about the whole book for a lot of the time. But in this Torah portion, when they're forming the army, which is specific to this Torah portion, it's so detailed because we said it's doing the consensus, it's doing the count. And it seems strange. So our question is, why all the detail? It seems to read like an endless, database of family names and statistics. Like the Torah doesn't usually give so much detail to things. It seems like it would have just been simpler for the Torah to summarize the whole consensus and just tell us in a few sentences, they counted everyone up, here's the final number, and this is what it is. So to understand this, we first need to know that the Torah describes the counting of each tribe in almost an identical fashion, which seems very repetitious. So on the one hand, the census is the great equalizer. Everyone counts as one. It's so similar. On the and therefore our individualities become non-important, of this whole picture. On the other hand, everyone is counted. And the collective whole is lacking if even one unit is not present. So this indicates that every individual has his unique contribution, that only he or she could contribute to make the collective whole. And so it's very important to know about the individual. So my individuality is important. On the other hand, if I'm not with everybody, then, it doesn't have to hold the same weight. So on the one hand, let me be an individual. Let me use my talents, my individuality. On the other hand, what do I have to do? What's important? To know that just my individuality alone can't nearly accomplish as much as when it's with a group and everybody is together. So the census expresses the, paradoxical interplay between the individual and collective identity. Each one of us is, completely different, and there's something in this world that I could accomplish and nobody else can. On the other hand, none of us is capable of fighting the battle alone. Imagine if the strongest warrior, went to the battlefield alone, he wouldn't be successful. So on the one hand, he could be the strongest and he has his, and everyone in an army really gives this idea in a very strong way, because you need each person to be doing their thing. This one needs to be in the front of the battlefield. That one needs to be preventing the enemies from coming in here. Everyone has a different aspect, and together we're able to be strong and successful. So the idea is that on the one hand, I'm an individual. On the other hand, I can't do it alone. So I need to shine my light, shine my personal talents. And on the other hand, I need to make sure that I'm complementing the other person's talents and that we're working together so we could take advantage of each other's, talents and strengths. I need to draw inspiration from the other. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, Ezu Chacham, who is wise, who learns from every person. Because there's always something to learn from another person. Even if you think, I'm wiser, I'm stronger, there's always something you can learn from the person. And for this reason, we must hear and read the census of all of the tribe, even though it seems to be saying the same thing. You added all them up, now you're using the same wording, and you're adding the next one up, because we want to hear them individually, even though outwardly they all look the same. And at the end number is like, okay, we have this end number, but no, each person as an individual is important. And this way we absorb all of their individual inner strengths and we're able to identify with them. And at the same time, we have the advantage of the collective whole. So we see that it says nobody else could do what you were brought in the world to do. And everybody has a different task. We always need to look at ourselves and we need to say, did I fulfill my task? When we go up to heaven, it says that God is not going to ask you. There was a very famous chassid, his name was Reb Zusha, and he said, I'm not scared to go up to heaven and they're going to ask me, why weren't you like Abraham, the first Jew? Why weren't you like Moses who gave the Torah? He says, they're not going to ask me that. Obviously, I'm not as holy and as great as Abraham and as Moshe. No way. But what I am scared of is they're going to ask me, why weren't you Reb Zusha? Meaning, why didn't you fulfill your purpose? Why weren't you the best you could be? So we really have to be honest with ourselves. And there's a famous Hayom Yom, which is, there are sayings from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he had a lot of different, sayings and learnings. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe took these teachings of his father-in-law and he compiled them into one short thing for every day. They're very meaningful, messages. And one of the messages is that if you are a person that could string pearls and do something unique that not everybody could do, and you're just baking bread, you have to look in the mirror and say, even though baking bread is a wonderful thing, if you have a talent that is not being used, you have to look in the mirror and say, it's actually considered a sin. Like if there's a doctor who could be saving lives, and instead he says, you know what, I'll just pack bags in the grocery store in Publix, then that is like a sin. That's like doing something that is totally not appropriate for you. Now, the person who's bagging groceries in Publix is wonderful. And he could be 100% fulfilling his goal because he doesn't know how to do surgery. So he's not doing anything wrong. But you just have to look in the mirror. There's a famous story of a young little boy. And he didn't seem like the brightest boy around town. And he was not such a schoolboy. He didn't do so well in school. He was a nice, sweet kid, but he just couldn't perform well in school and he didn't do well in his tests. And one day, his teacher spoke to this young boy's father. And the teacher said, listen, your son is very sweet, but honestly, he's not really gaining much. And he's not really learning much. And I don't think he's going to be able to go on to the next grade. So I recommend that you should send him to be an apprentice by someone. He's probably good with his hands. And why should he waste his time here? Let him, it's inevitable. It's going to happen sooner or later anyways, that he's not going to make it in the yeshiva and the school system. He's not an intellectual. So why don't you send him as an apprentice to work? And so the father had this conversation with the teacher, and he's telling his wife in the evening after they thought their young boy was sleeping, but really the young boy was up, and he overheard this conversation. And the conversation went something like this. The father says, I spoke to Yehuda's Rebbe, to his teacher, and he told me that he's really not performing well in school. And, we may as well send him to start working, to be an apprentice, to learn a skill, because he doesn't really seem very capable of learning Torah. The mother said, what? My precious son, I so badly want him to learn Torah. I can't believe this. This is such a disappointment. I always look forward to seeing him go through yeshiva and graduating and having that Torah's, having all that knowledge and being a scholar. And the father said, listen, what are we supposed to do? He can't. And the mother was so bitter, so broken. She had tears and she was crying. And can you imagine the son overheard this without them knowing? So the next day he goes to school and he says, I am going to put every ounce of energy into making sure that I am going to do everything I can to really study well. And so that's what he does. He does everything. He focuses, he puts his brain, and he did pretty well that day in school. And the next day he comes back. And I forgot to mention, at the end of the conversation, the mother says, let's let him stay another month. And, after the month, we'll see. I'm not ready yet. And every day he is getting better. And after a week, the Rebbe's like, what's going on? Oh my goodness, I told the father, he actually seems to be learning pretty nicely. And after a month, he was really absorbing so much and doing so well. And the Rebbe calls the father and says, something happened. I don't know. He's learning really well. He's doing good. Don't pull him out. And he just kept getting better and better and better. And he got into the top classes. And he graduated. And nobody remembered. No one knew. Everyone just thought he was this very bright, great boy. And he became a very famous Torah scholar. And he wrote a book, a sefer, a Jewish book. And he wrote this book. He finished writing the book. He published it. And he made a big celebration. A lot of people were at the celebration. He had a lot of students and followers. And at the celebration, he stood up and he says, does anybody know why we were having this celebration? So all the people, said, because you wrote this book and it's such a big accomplishment and you brought more Torah into this world. And he says, no, that's not why I made this big meal. That's not why I invited everybody. He says, I am inviting people because I could have, after 120 years, gone up to heaven and they would have said to me, why didn't you reach your potential? Why didn't you become the person you could be? And he would have said, what do you mean? I'm a shoemaker. Everyone's looking at him, a shoemaker. What? And he says, I would have been there sitting there as a shoemaker and they would have been saying, why didn't you reach your potential? And what would I have answered? What do you mean? What? My Rebbe, my parents, everybody said that was a good fit for me. Why weren't you a Torah scholar? What do you mean? I'm not a Torah scholar. I'm a shoemaker. When I was young, they took me out of school and they said that I shouldn't be. Everyone's looking at him, what? And so then he told the story. I overheard his parents' conversation and how, if not for that, he would have ended up being a shoemaker and he wouldn't have toiled and toiled and toiled. And so he said, I'm making this meal. Thank you that I was able to reach my potential and to teach everybody this lesson that you can indeed reach higher heights than you think and set the bar high and really be honest with yourself. Did I try my hardest to do what I think is my mission? Am I really fulfilling my mission? And he was very famous. He was called the Noida B'Yehuda. And people are baffled when they hear this backstory that, he was, that he could have worked out differently if he hadn't heard that and pushed himself. I want to end off with one more point about this name that we call this Torah portion. We call this whole book Bamidbar, in the desert. Because a desert is, like we said, a place that is desolate. It's ownerless. It's just like there's nothing there. And the Torah was given in this place, in a midbar, in a desert. Why was the Torah given? Yes, it was given on a mountain. And we learned about that last week. It was given on a mountain. So a mountain, we said it was given on the smallest mountain to show we have to be humble. Yet it was given on a mountain to show that we need to have pride. You can't just be humble, humble, humble. You have to make sure that you have pride. You have Jewish pride and you're proud. But together with being proud, you're not haughty, you're humble at the same time. That's the perfect ingredient to being a good Jew. Be proud, but be humble. Because if you're not humble, there's no room for anything else. You can't learn Torah. You can't help someone else because you're too full of yourself. So what's the idea of, though, at the same time it was given in a midbar? It was given in the desert. So we learned just now, the beginning of the class, to be able to refine the divine energy that's, in the desert, to show us our purpose in Torah. We're supposed to fuse the physical and the spiritual and reveal the divine energy of Hashem. But there's another lesson. And the other lesson is that it's given in a desert, desolate, ownerless, to show that the Torah is ownerless. You make it, everyone should own it, but you got to go out there and own it. The Torah is for everyone. Some people might think you have to be sophisticated, you have to be smart, you have to be knowledgeable, you have to live here, you have to live there. And what's the Torah telling us? Torah, it's in a place that is hefker, that is ownerless, that is just desolate. You could be desolate, you could have nothing. It's for everybody. It's in a place that's hefker. It's in a place that's ownerless, to show every single Jew is connected. Every single Jew can get the Torah. And every single Jew has the potential to learn Torah and get that Torah and connect to it. So you don't have to think, it's not for me. It's for everybody. And you don't have to think, I need to have beautiful grass, right? So many different things, a desert. I'm just that desert. I'm the one who's desolate. Then that's it. The Torah is for you. It's for every single Jew. So that's what I would like to end off with, and leave the last minute if anyone has any questions. Any questions?
Thank you, Devorah Leah.
Thank you so much for joining, and have a wonderful day.